Now reconvenes with discussions on the fiscal year 2017 budget requests and economic outlook. This hearing by the Committee on Appropriations Adjudication was called for the main purpose of evaluating the economic outlook of our island. The committee invited several economists on the island to partake, and I note that we have several of them here. And each of you have invited today to lend your expertise and experience on specific aspects of our economy and to generate a healthy discussion about the economic outlook on our island, which is a critical component of the budget. The committee intends on getting a thorough understanding of the various drivers that are responsible for moving our economy. Ultimately, your perspective on the general state of our economy will be crucial in determining the external factors that impact the government of Guam's fiscal position. As you are aware, I have prefaced each of the previous hearings to the reality that the government of Guam is facing a $20 million cumulative general deficit fund. Now more than ever, it behooves us to examine our budgeting assumptions, their basis, and to critically examine each piece of data to exercise our due diligence of the taxpayers. With this being said, I would like to start with our largest driver, tourism.
Holiday Vice Speaker and Senators of the Guam Legislature, please allow I'd like to introduce myself once again. My name is Anna Sid. I am the Director of Tourism Research from the Guam Visitors Bureau, and we are here today to present the tourism overview from fiscal year 2015. Visitor arrivals in 2015 grew 2.3% from fiscal year 2014 levels. Fiscal year 2015 is the second top fiscal year in Guam's tourism history, beating out arrivals from almost 20 years ago. Guam achieved another fiscal year milestone, welcoming 1,372,581 visitors, making this the top arrivals in the year this century, and the second highest in nearly 20 years. In fact, August and March 2015 were recorded as the third and sixth best months, respectively, for arrivals ever. This also meets 3 consecutive years that we have broken the 1.3 million mark. Guam's top banner year was fiscal year 1997, about 20 years ago, with 1,411,447 visitors recorded. The increase in arrivals was primarily due to the increase of air seat capacity from Korea. In fiscal year 2015, Guam saw the inaugural flight of Air Busan as well as T-Way Air. Additionally, Jeju Air, which has been servicing the Incheon-Guam route for several years, expanded their gateway cities to include Busan, Korea's second largest city. Japan arrivals saw a 5.6% decrease from the previous year at 779,405 arrivals. Visitors from our largest source market have dropped in recent years due to the declining outbound travelers from Japan. Japan now makes up about 57% of Guam's total arrival mix, down from a high of 80%. This is in large part due to domestic issues affecting travel internationally, a stagnant economy driving the increased focus on domestic visits within Japan. Total outbound travel from Japan in fiscal year saw a decrease of 5% versus the fiscal year 2014 period. One of the primary goals of fiscal year 2015 was to stimulate consumer demand from Japan, slow the negative arrival trend, and to recover market share. What's working with us is that we have a stronger yen. With this, GVB continues to aggressively and strategically target segments such as business groups, students, and the senior market. We will also focus on family, including 3-generation travel to yield mass travel. will partner with online travel agents for the FIT market and continue with traditional agents for groups. Support existing and attract additional airlines with marketing co-op and incentive programs, and promote local events to create experiential travel. The challenges that we have for this market include the decreasing seat capacity that continues to be a challenge for us. We just found out recently that the, Delta Airlines will cease its daily service out of the Osaka Gateway effective November towards the end of this year. And we were also told that Korea Airlines will also follow suit. Korea continues its phenomenal arrival growth to date. Korea arrivals from fiscal year 2015 increased to the highest levels Guam has ever experienced. Arrivals totaled 384,112 visitors, making the past fiscal year the banner year for Korea arrivals. Additional support from T-Way and Air Busan during the tail end of fiscal year has undoubtedly augmented availability of flights into Guam to help arrivals grow. Special attention was paid to attract an increased number of meeting, incentive, exhibition, and conference groups on Guam. Welcome 35,610 participants. Korea arrival growth has averaged a 33% increase over the past 3 years. Moving along to China, arrivals from the People's Republic of China also grew significantly with a 62.2% increase over fiscal year 24 numbers. Guam welcomed 31,752 arrivals, which surpassed GVB's goal of 20,000 visitors for the fiscal year. The continuous support of airline carriers such as United Airlines is a major part of the contributing success of visitors from China. GVB will continue to strengthen awareness and identification of Guam by increasing exposure among the consumer market through cooperative and online program campaigns, user-generated promotion, PR, and other joint promotions. We will also help stakeholders facilitate business growth through stakeholder opportunities and promote Guam as a romantic destination, a sports destination, a unique meeting and incentives destination, and an ideal family destination with a clean environment and close proximity. Other visitor markets continue to grow and diversify. The Philippine market increased by 20.6%, Europe by 29.2%, and Hong Kong by 13.4%. In fiscal year 2015, GVB implemented a change in its marketing strategy, focusing on events and things a visitor can do only on Guam. In July 2016, GVB held a Visit Guam 2015 Expo at the Micronesia Mall for local residents. At this event, GVB hosted close to 100 media to promote Guam events throughout the villages, such as the Agate Mango Festival and the Mauricio Crab Festival, the much-anticipated 12th Festival of the Pacific Arts, and other GVB signature events. The fiscal year 2015 Tourist Attraction Fund collections were 16.2% higher than the previous year, totaling $36.5 million. The increase can be attributed to the rise in hotel room and occupancy rates. For fiscal year year-to-date 2016, arrivals through June grew 10.9% to 1,110,138 versus 1,020. Guam's major market, Japan, posted 4.2% less visitors, while China, U.S., Hawaii, Taiwan, the Philippines gained 40.5%, 30.7%, 8.5%, and 30.7%, respectively. On July 9, 2016, GVB unveiled its marketing plan for 2017 and declared Visit Guam 2017 as the Year of Love. GVB will continue to build on the success of Visit Guam 2016 for aggressively marketing its signature events such as Shop Guam Festival, the Guam International Marathon, the Guam Micronesia Island Fair, the Barbecue Block Party, and the Cocoa Road Race. The fiscal year 2017 forecast has been set at 1.3 million visitors, an increase of 1.4 from 2014 levels. The number of jobs required to sustain the 1.3 million arrivals is 19,444 jobs. Fiscal year 2016 hotel occupancy tax collection is tracking at 39 million, with 29,437,259 collected through June this year. With the 1.43 visitor projection, we anticipate 40 million on hotel occupancy tax collections. To wrap up 2015, visitor spending on Guam grew 6.8% in 2015, reaching about 1.6 billion, with total impact on business sales of more than 52.3 billion. Actually, I'm sorry, 2.3 billion. $1 in $5 of gross island product, 1 in 3 jobs on the island is supported by the tourism economy. Visitor-supported employment growth is outpacing island employment growth. And total state and local tax revenues supported by the tourism activity reached 245 million. And those were just some quick facts that were a result of the update of our tourism impact study that we just recently concluded this year. Just a few fun facts from this report. About 79,000 in visitor spending supports 1 direct job on Guam, which means that it takes the spending of about 70 visitors to support a job. Thought of in another way, each Boeing 757 that lands on Guam has 180 seats, enough to support 2.5 jobs on the island, assuming all onboard passengers are visitors.
Well, you've answered most of my questions with that very thorough report. Can you provide our office with a copy of that?
Yeah, definitely, sir. And what it is that we held our membership meeting last July, about 2.5 weeks ago, and I do not have a final report of the tourism impact study on Guam, but I do have a draft report that we are willing to go ahead and disseminate to everyone here today.
Okay. But that short report, it'd be so much easier for the senators when they read the budget to
definitely
have one
just a consolidated.
Paragraph. Yeah, consolidated
I'll get
report.
this to you.
Okay.
Yes.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Maybe just make a copy. Let them borrow it to make a copy,
Okay.
so that because I know that these two were taking quite a bit of notes. But
Okay.
just on the you had all that spending numbers at the end.
Yes.
Is there a difference between the Korean and the Japanese Korean visitor and the Japanese visitor spending? Do you notice?
Yeah, one clear thing that we discovered, Vice Speaker, is that we look at the airlines that service Korea. Out of all that, we have about 5 or 6 airline carriers servicing the Korea market. One of them is a premium carrier, Korean Air. One of the issues that we actually discussed at board of directors level is that whether or not LCCs are actually yielding cheaper visitors to Guam. One thing we did realize through our exit surveys, when we ran cross-tabulations using the low-cost carrier visitors to participate in the survey, we realized that although they're flying an LCC, they actually spend more on Guam versus, say, visitors who come to Guam on Korean Air. They have a tendency to spend less because the cost of the package is higher.
But as compared to the Japanese, do you notice anything?
They actually spend less. I don't have the exact dollar amounts, but that's something that I can send down to you.
Okay.
Yes.
Do any of the other economists have any comments on whether or not the Japanese and the Korean spending is different? Okay. Okay.
You made mention about the fact that Japan, I guess, the number of visitors as a proportion of the total number of visitors has dropped from whatever it is to down to 50%. And I'm just wondering, has the absolute number of visitors, has that also decreased? Because if the total number of visitors has been increasing from other areas, then it may be that the absolute number of visitors from Japan is remaining about the same. It's just that proportionately it is not as. So I was just kind of doing my DI.
Yeah, actually, Senator, we're averaging about a 5% decrease to date for this fiscal year out of Japan. But we're also happy to make mention that last year around this time we were tracking about 7% behind. So we've been able to bridge the gap with our visitor losses out of Japan. Now we see an acceleration in terms of visitor mix out of Korea is because of the seat capacity. So we are seeing pretty much a shift of 8 and 10 visitors, what we used to have about 2-3 years ago. Now we're having about a 57%.
I guess the only thing that kind of confuses me a bit is when we start using proportions.
Yes.
As opposed to, I'm just kind of thinking, at one time we used to get, let's say, 1,000 visitors coming in from Japan, and as a proportion of the total number, that makes up a high percentage. But now that the total number is increasing, but we're still getting that 1,000 visitors in, and so really the number of visitors coming out of Japan hasn't really declined as much, but in proportion to the rest. And the same way that we talk about how Japan or China has increased by 62%. Well, the number of Chinese visitors was really small. So if it goes from last year 10, this year it went to 20, well, it increased by what?
About 100%.
100%. And if you have that same number of increase of visitors, let's say from the Japan market, where it went from 1,000 to 1,010, it's going to be a blip. It doesn't even show on the radar screen. So I just kind of get a little thrown off by the percentages that are used, and so just to show you that I'm confused.
Yeah. Understood. I understand where you're coming from. Japan, of course, has a larger visitor base than, say, the smaller markets such as Taiwan, Hong Kong, or China. So what we do is we actually look at it as a whole. We haven't diminished the fact that Japan is actually our main market. And we're trying to push aggressively to try to prevent the hemorrhaging that we've been experiencing over the past couple of months.
Bradley, you want to comment on the spend of the Japanese versus the Korean? If you've noticed anything?
I haven't looked at it in the last few months, but about 9 months ago I looked at it and ran some analyses. What I determined was that the Japanese spend more on a per day basis in local expenditures than the Koreans, but they stay a shorter period of time than the Koreans, and so the difference between the total spending per tourist between Japanese and Koreans, if I remember correctly, is about $32. The Koreans spend about $32 less per visit than the Japanese, if I remember correctly.
That's good, because my good friend here likes absolute numbers as opposed to percentages, so I like that number too. And I'm sure GVB has the numbers of the absolute number of visitors coming in, so that Senator Ad is comfortable about the numbers. It's 3,000 as opposed to, well, you can provide it to him or send it in so that it's part of the record, so he sees what the absolute number is. And Because I think it's both.
We can send the fiscal year aggregated visitor expenditures by market, and then we can also provide what we have fiscal year to date that'll run us through June of this year.
So the bottom line is our tourism industry is healthy and looks to remain even healthier in 2017. Is that the bottom line of your report?
We are forecasting about a 2.3% growth for 2017. Of course, we need to take into consideration that we're not going to have FestPac this year. So we're going to perhaps see slightly less growth during those months. What we're trying to do during the month of May is we're going to bring back the Guam Micronesia Island Fair. Instead of having it a 3-day weekend, which runs Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, we're actually looking into having it for 5 days. It's my understanding, too, that we perhaps might also invite other participating islands, such as the Cook Islands, to join GMIF this coming 2017.
On employment, I was just wondering if, Mr. Hiles, you'd like to give us an update on how we're doing with employment, or just general your economic forecasting or analysis. You might need to slide that closer to you.
Yeah, before I go into the macroeconomic view of employment, I'd like to point out that often businesses and various policy analysis want the micro detail, and this year we put out a great deal of micro detail. We put out the most comprehensive ever survey of occupational illness and industries for 2014, 13, and 12. 100 pages of statistical tables on illness and injury program under a federal program. We also put out the most extensive minimum wage impact estimates detailing the impact or the number of people below various thresholds by industry and occupation. That's over 100 pages on our website. And we also produced the most extensive occupational detail by sector, federal, local government, and private sector on wages by occupation. That's also 100 or 2 pages, also on our website. At the macro level, the economy in terms of employment grew significantly in 2015, primarily due to growth in tourism and the opening of new establishments in the medical services, along with the hotel, with the Dusatani Hotel. In the last couple of quarters, it's plateaued and stabilized, both in terms of the number of employees and the earnings. The primary reason for that is the little bit of a slowdown in construction. And there's 2 main factors going into that. One is the virtual non-approval of H-2 workers since December 2015, along with the lack of major projects issued by the defense contracts since also December 2015. The local building permit side is running above last year, and with major government of Guam projects, the Waterworks project of above $50 million was just issued in March. And other projects are still in the works that are mentioned in the economic outlook. Waterworks, airport, power authority, Port Authority, Community College, Legislature, the Arts Building, Waterworks, Education, $100 million school, University of Guam, $21 million, land management, and So there's an enormous number of projects and dollars appropriations. So in the intermediate term, the appropriations and available funds from federal sources as well as bond-funded and private sources set the a leading indicator of what's likely to happen in the intermediate future. In the shorter term, the best indicator of construction that will commence is the building permits and the which covers the civilian side, and the Department of Defense contracts on the federal side. The impact of the slowdown on H-2 workers has been quite slight so far. In December 2014, there were 1,057 H-2 workers in construction, and we're actually slightly above that in June 2016 with 1,096. They had been going up slightly in December 2015. They were up to 1,256 in March 16, 1183, and they've declined to 1096 in June 16. So far the impact has been on the construction has been noticeable, but it's still pretty moderate. The March 2016 employment is out. Total employment increased over the year by 450 jobs, so the growth rate has slowed, but continues. And when the projects start to come out again, hopefully, that the growth rate should accelerate.
That sounds very positive. Except for, I'm trying to figure out, why was the military, what did you say, lack of military contracts?
Right.
What was that? What that about?
I think there's, yeah, we've been seeing over the years a number of major military contracts coming out sporadically over the year. There's a protest on the MAC award, the $990 million authorization, and that was was a news story that was scheduled to be settled in, I believe, June, but I haven't heard anything more about that, if that's been resolved. So that contracting authority may be a reason for the delay in the issuance of some of those projects.
And this decline in military will be, not really offset, but will be addressed, offset by local permits. You say the Gov Guam projects are up, GWA, GPA, and the university are having projects. So those projects are moving forward at this point?
Yes.
Are you aware of if any of these are being affected by the H-2 issue that we were having?
I'm not aware of the specific impact on those.
Okay. The military ones, is there any impact that you've noticed on with this H-2 issue?
I don't know if that's a factor. I suspect it's more related to the MAC contract issue.
The protest.
Right.
And
also another point I think needs to be made is that the total employment in construction has been running around 6,000, and only about 20% or about 1,000 of those are H-2 workers. So, and the numbers have declined by, approximately 100 or less than 200. So that will have some impact, but it is not at this point a huge driver in the economy. Whether that's affecting consideration of future contracts, I don't have that information.
that's very good news. The only one that I was wondering about was now the medical establishment. Have you noticed any issue there? That opened in
I've
16.
seen some news stories that the lack of nurses has caused closure of some services.
Except for that, if we can address that, everything else looks good with the other projects. Seeming.
The local projects will fill in some of the gap, but not all of it if the DoD contracts don't start coming out.
Okay. Any of your questions on the economic side? On the labor?
Oh, no, that's what you said. I just had one question if I could go back to the tourism. So a projected growth of about 2+% is being made for 2017. Is the completion of the Dusit Thani play a major role in that projected increase, because now it has the capacity to, host larger conventions and whatnot? Did that play a large part in that forecast?
It did, Senator. We took into consideration the number of hotel rooms that are available to date, and also the current seat capacity levels, just forecasting what we have, what are not regular scheduled flight service, but also charter flights. So indeed, those were factors in coming up with the forecast.
And I only ask that because I know that there's been a lot of discussion and hoopla about, well, now that we've got this, 1,000 capacity ballroom that can host larger conference rooms, have we actually looked at that project to see if in fact it is capable today of hosting that large of a group, or is it still kind of like at the limited stage at half of its capacity?
Actually, I'm glad you brought that up, because in May we actually hosted the PATA annual conference, the PATA annual summit. So it was the first time ever that we took on this type of event, and successfully. It just shows you that we do have the facilities to hold major conventions on Guam. It was the first and foremost of its kind, and we're hoping it's not going to be the last.
Do you have an estimate as to what was the attendance, for example, at PATA?
If I'm not mistaken, we're looking at about 600
Okay.
participants. That is a combination of both local and off-island.
Right. And I think their large conference room supposedly has a capacity of about 1,000,
That is-
provided it gets the permit to be able to host that many from the fire department.
Yes, that is correct.
Right. I don't think they have that permit yet.
I'm not familiar at this point. We will definitely look into it and
Yeah.
get back to you.
No,
On it.
and I only raise that because,
Mhm.
I recognize that the projected increase in tourism is dependent on many factors, the outflow from Japan, the number of seats and all that. And all that is also on the assumption that we have these facilities that's going to attract them here and accommodate them. And if that piece is not viable, then I'm just wondering if everything else is for naught. Right? So.
Yeah, I'm not familiar as to why perhaps they don't have that type of permit, but it's definitely something we're going to look into.
Sure.
Yeah.
Thank you.
As long as he's brought back construction, maybe any of you, the two new hotels that have been got QCs, does anybody know what the status of those two new hotels are?
I believe one of them had a groundbreaking already.
Okay. That's the one that's 300 rooms?
Into one bay.
Yeah, on the Nico, the Mare something.
I believe it's called the Subaki Towers. It's a
Yeah.
property that will belong to PHR or
Mhm.
KenCorp. Yes,
That one broke ground.
yes, that broke ground.
Does anybody know when how far along construction is? Either one of you?
I'm not familiar with the status, Vice Speaker, but it's my understanding that the hotel should be completed by the end of, by fall of 2018.
Fall 2018?
Yes.
Oh, okay. Well, who wants to address the issue of the economy? Okay. Go ahead, Jim. Would you like to?
Yes, we still have an economy. First of all, I think I need to move it a little closer. I'm soft-spoken. First, I'd like to thank you for the invitation to be here this morning, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Vice Speaker, and Senators. I'm glad that you're able to attend also. My assessment of the economy is a little bit scary. The reason being that the last time I said the economy was doing well, they had an earthquake in Japan the following day and our economy collapsed because Japanese visitor arrivals collapsed. Japanese visitor arrivals are still on the decline, but for other reasons. Japan's economy is not doing very well. It's been flat for, well, the lost decade is now 25 years along. The value of the yen has recovered quite a bit in just the last 3 or 4 months. It had fallen to about 125 to the dollar. Overnight it was at 101 to the dollar. But a year and a half, 2 years ago, it was at about 74, 75 to the dollar. So it had lost an enormous amount of value relative to the dollar, making visits to Guam appear substantially more expensive, like nearly 2/3 more expensive. Now that the yen has recovered in value, there are other economic issues in Japan that are also creating difficulties in, not so much in are attracting tourists, but in those tourists having the capacity to travel internationally. Fortunately, the Korean visitor arrivals have largely replaced, I think is fair to say, for the losses from Japan. In fact, we saw, everybody else here works on a fiscal year basis. I work on a calendar year basis. In 2015, we saw the highest number of visitor arrivals in any calendar year in history in Guam. And so far this year, we're tracking for an additional substantial increase. I have data through June, so that's half of the year, but my projection for this year is substantially higher than GVB's, that we should see about a 10% increase in visitor arrivals. Now, GVB knows a lot more about that than I do because they look at hotel room capacity, they look at seats on planes. I merely look at the number of arrivals and do a seasonally adjusted estimate of the following year. Nonetheless, though, I would say that our tourism industry is very healthy. I think that if the hotels have been able to raise room rates, which they have been, and if occupancy rates stay where they are or increase as well, that we can see quite a bit more revenue coming to the island from hotels and other visitor activities. With regard to the military, we don't have any Marines arriving from Okinawa yet, as far as I can tell. They were all supposed to be here last year. The construction work has been stalled partly by some protests on MAC contracts, but I think more than anything else by Congress's reluctance or inability to fund the Marine relocation here. The amount of expenditures budgeted for construction in Guam by the Department of Defense for 2016, this fiscal year, we're just barely above the average for normal years in Guam. So the military activity has not really provided as much of a boost as I had hoped. I think we are still running a lot of temporary living allowance personnel coming in. I don't know how that compares with previous years, though, because I don't have those numbers separated out. Those TLAs, the temporary living allowance, military personnel, though, do boost what would be considered tourism revenues, because they tend to live in hotels and eat in restaurants and rent cars and so forth, in much the same manner as a tourist would. I think that we are seeing something of a resurgence in construction here. I often joke about it, but it's somewhat serious. One of my better indicators of the performance of Guam's economy is the amount of rebar I see rolling up Marine Drive on the back of flatbed trucks. And I'm seeing more of that in the course of the last 9 months or so, which is encouraging to me. I think we've got more construction going on. We've seen, I think Gary had mentioned we'd seen a modest decline in the number of jobs in the construction industry, but I think a lot of that is because so many projects, so many major projects had been completed in the last year or so. I have to tell you, I'm frankly somewhat surprised that the government is running the size of a deficit that it is this year. I don't have a very good explanation for that, because I don't really analyze the revenue figures. I leave that to the government to do. But it does surprise me that those numbers are not more favorable than they are. And I'm wondering if, there was an article, I believe last week in the Pacific Daily News, regarding the collectibles that are building up at Rev and Tax, that I believe was $150 million. And that may be part of the reason for the shortfall this year. All in all, though, I think that the economy is performing relatively well. It's performing better than it has been in probably nearly 20 years. Fiscal year 97 was the highest year for visitor arrivals, and my recollection is that toward the end of that fiscal year, on August 6th of 97, we had what they called the Asian financial crisis. I sat up all night watching markets plunge around the globe as that contagion took hold. And then on, August 6th was the Korean Airlines crash on Nimitz Hill, or the controlled collision with the ground, as FAA terms it. It was October 21st that the Asian financial markets collapsed. And then in mid-December, we saw what a gentle tropical breeze can do when it gets a running start from the Marshall Islands. We called that Typhoon Paka. And all three of those events kind of undercut not only tourism, but also our economy in general. Also, we're just recently, within the last few years, seeing an expansion in the number of hotel rooms here. The boom that we experienced from the mid-'80s on through roughly the mid-1990s was also undercut by the failure in the real estate market in Japan in 1990 and the failure of their financial markets in 1991. And that's really the beginning of their extended lost decade. I didn't prepare written testimony.
Well, no, you scared me with your opening statement, but you ended with a very positive one. So I'm glad.
Are we in a tsunami zone? No, it's. I think that the economy is doing well. I think that it's not dazzling like it was in 1989. We're not seeing the nearly 20% real growth in the economy that we did in those rather heady days, but we are seeing real growth in the economy. We're seeing increases, modest nonetheless, but increases in payroll employment. We're seeing some substantial increases in visitor arrivals. I think that all but 1 month this calendar year has been a record, and that's important. Last year we had, what was it, 1,407,000, does that sound about right? Visitors? Oh, calendar year. I'm sorry, you work on fiscal years. It's not fair. For the fiscal year. Okay. Yeah. Okay. And I didn't bring my numbers with me on that. I apologize. But I'm looking at perhaps an increase of as much as 100 to 110,000 this calendar year compared to last calendar year.
And the growth that you see is happening right now, as compared to previous years, what percentage growth, if you can give?
Well, again, looking at a very simple adjustment, seasonally adjusting just the visitor arrival numbers that I have available to me, I'm looking at total arrivals in calendar year 2016 of 1.52 million. That's compared to about 1.41 million last year. And fiscal year to date, June, I'm seeing an increase of 10.9% over the same period, the first 9 months of last year's fiscal year 15. So very, very healthy increases in visitor arrivals.
And the construction industry, you say, is looking good? You see the rebar going up and down the street?
Yes, yeah, that's that's kind of a casual observation, though. But our business cycle is driven by the construction industry, and when I see more construction activity, it's encouraging to me.
And you're seeing that?
Yes.
Oh, that's...
Although the payroll numbers have fallen off recently as projects were completed, but I think that we're going to see additional projects. In fact, the one hotel that's broken ground by the NICO, and then I believe Ladera Towers is supposed to renovate this year to become a hotel of sorts. And there's also supposed to be groundbreaking on a third hotel, or on a second hotel, I believe in the fourth quarter of this year.
Okay.
Second
I think it's behind the Alcanta.
Yeah, it's Gary's report. It's Cita de Mare Hotel, behind the Alcanta Mall. Yeah. There is one thing that concerns me, though. Now GITA is offering a special qualifying certificate for hotels for up to 1,600 rooms. I think that these three projects and one more smaller project is kind of going to hit that ceiling, and it may be viable at this point to provide additional potential for qualifying certificates for hotels. It is our biggest industry, and the more investment that we can bring into hotel rooms, I think the better our private sector economy will be.
Yeah, those two projects, I think, are a little over 800.
840, I believe.
So there's
500,
a little bit left, but it should be looked at.
Yeah,
Okay.
I think it's worth taking a look at and tracking, because if nothing else, within the last 9 months or so, I've had a couple of contacts from Korea expressing interest in developing resorts here, but their interest is away from Tuman, away from what I think we can all agree is kind of the Japanese tourist district. They're looking more at Boca Point.
Did you have a question?
Dan, you made the remark you're not surprised at the level of deficit spending, but you are somewhat concerned. Can you explain that?
I am surprised at the level of deficit spending.
You are?
Yeah.
And concerned.
Of course. I've got a couple of potholes on Route 5 that need repair. There are a lot of other elements of that as well. Anytime the government's budget is pinched, it affects the economy overall. Guam is the largest single employer in Guam, and is that right? Well, with the exception of retail trade. The government of Guam is the largest single employer. Anytime the government faces fiscal difficulties, that ripples throughout the economy, and so that's of concern to me. Also, I think that as the government's budget is pinched, public services are also squeezed a little bit, and that's of concern to me.
Mr. Bradley may have mentioned the 160 million in collectibles. Maybe if I can, just so that there's a better idea, what's the aging on those, and what does that look like as far as being collectible in the near future?
Mr. Chair, I apologize. I don't have the numbers on me. I wasn't prepared for that. But I will discuss that with you, at a later time.
Okay.
Right now, the 160, we're looking at, there's some adjustments that need to be done, made to that 160 in relation to the rebates, the GITA rebates. So we need to do that. We are still cleaning up our records, and we hope to get, the actual clean number, hopefully within the next month or two, after we clean out all the adjustments that has to be done. But I'm looking, the average is about 120 million.
And the aging on that? Is that current? Is that for this current year, or is
No,
it
right now
for-
it's reflected at 160 million. But if we continue, right now we're trying to clear out all the old credits or some payments that were previously made. We're still cleaning out the AR. So once we do that, hopefully we'll bring it down tremendously. And I believe like 10.8 was also in there for, again, the GMH withholding. So that is included in the 160. So once we clean out our accounts, hopefully within the next 2 months, we'll get a much clearer picture of what the true AR is.
Okay. On taxes,
Yes.
that one we were interested in what you thought the tax provision should be for next year.
Yes.
And what's the recommendation from Rev and Tax?
Our recommendation is that 125 million for 2016 refunds. And the basis of that is because we have the ACTC that we get reimbursed. That's about 22 million a year. We average about 22 million. And then with the new agents that we just hired, we hired a total of 6 employees at examination. 5 of them are tax auditors, and their focus is, as we all realize, earned income tax credit is about 60 million unfunded. So our concern, and we see the potential for fraud or even post claims on the EITC. So our goal is to, of course, reduce the tax liability by conducting tax audits. And this 5 will tremendously help. Right now, there was, I think, 300 cases that was already referred to these auditors, and we have, per auditors, about 107 cases that are being assigned to them. So we are working aggressively to address the tax refund liability, because, again, the potential is there for, fraud. And we also, as they examine these cases, if they find out that it was due to false claims, we do have the authority to suspend earned income tax credits for 2 years or 10 years. Depending on the case.
How much of EITC do you use?
It's about 60 million.
And is that in the 125 that you're
Yes,
talking about?
yes it is.
And have you noticed any change in the tax code that could affect either collections or EITC or?
Well, I noticed that last year, even the IRS sent out, they're becoming more strict and addressing tax preparers, that if they falsely, they have a huge questionnaire now that they must ask each taxpayer, because, again, the potential, and their concern also is that is growing because of the right now I think at 6,200 for the maximum earned income tax credit that an individual can qualify for. So they're also concerned. So we're trying to get also the tax preparers to take accountability on preparing these tax returns.
Just to be clear, was that a 16 million unfunded mandate on the EITC or
6-0.
6-0.
6-0. Yes. And now, and then I also understand that, unfortunately, a report is owed, but between 2009 and 2013, we were able to disallow EITC claims of 4.3 million. So you see that, that was when staff was limited. So now that we have an additional staff of 5 more people, and I think that's why we're standing by the 125, that's, really good, solid estimate.
Morning. Was that a jump from 20 million from the previous year?
No, I believe it was like 50 million last year.
10?
Yes, I don't remember, but I know it's up to 60 million now.
It may have actually gone down. I thought last year it was 70. And so with your disallowance of the 4, I can understand that we're now going back down, and with the increase in the amount that they're supposed to be able to make,
Correct.
that hopefully that the address that. Did anybody else want to address the economy over here? Okay.
Good morning, Vice Chairman, Vice Speaker, and members of the committee here. I'm Albert Perez, Chief Economist at the Bureau of Stats and Plans. I'm not, that involved in the formulation of economic forecast, nor with the budget revenue forecast either. But since my principal role basically with the government is to do the consumer price index and to do some semblance of external trade picture, which we do with the import and export trade reports. But one of my collateral assignments, as mandated by law, is to produce some summary report about the federal military contribution and economic outlook, which we've been doing since 2009. And it has evolved, particularly because of the reports, the information which is provided by USAspending.gov. And so I think since 2010, they've maintained a new format for reporting expenditures from all sources with the federal government. And so I have provided you a handout about, it's a spreadsheet that I've consistently produced twice a year. And so I've updated it through August 3rd, which was just a couple of days ago. And this is also a variation of what we file on a 6-month basis, just to not only give specific dollar information, but also the magnitude of change on a year-to-year basis. And so if we just look at that, it includes the years by format from 2012 to 2017. As you can imagine, there's really no data on the year 2017 aside from that which is contained in the executive budget request. And we have information about projected tourism arrivals, which I believe is a different number than what GPB is reporting today. So we can pretty much reduce that, but it's consistent with Joe Bradley's estimate of close to 10% of an increase in tourism arrivals over 2016. So just going back to the report, if we look at total federal expenditures on Guam, to include contracts, grants, loans, and other financial assistance, the totals have ranged between $924 million to $1.3 billion in 2015. And in 2016, through August 3rd, the total recorded expenditures at a federal level amounts to $726 billion, which is a 44% decrease fiscal year to date over 2015. Of course, this is a moving target. as the information is uploaded, then these numbers will be, revised. But it does lend credence to the general observation that expenditures in Guam at the federal level have decreased, in some fashion related to the military buildup. Again, this is just information, published information, which is basically food for thought in engaging the economy. The lower end of the second half of this report includes the economic impact, and this is basically just a compilation of published economic indices, which include construction permits, real estate sales volume, employment, unemployment rate, average change in the price level or inflation, population projection as provided by the U.S. Census, and the Guam Real Gross Domestic Product as published by the U.S. Bureau of Economic Analysis. So we've seen, the biggest gain in construction permits in 2014. For 2015, that has dropped, somewhat. The real estate sales volume. This is just information which I just added to my initial template, just to give you an idea of the real estate transactions since 2012. In 2015, it's trending at 320.4 million. And of course, we don't have any information on these through 2016. Any actual information for 2016. It's good news with respect to the employment, which Gary Hiles has articulated. And going forward, we hope to have an increasing number of people in the labor force, along with either consistent or even possibly a decrease in the unemployment rate. The inflation numbers, has been of issue lately, particularly with the first quarter CPI, and it's basically an issue with respect to the weights assigned to the items which we track and report about. So if we dismiss the new rate structure or fee schedule with the GMH, we really haven't seen much change in the price level. So it's consistent in some regard to the U.S. inflation rate, which is about 1%. But because of the construct CPI, our actual number is closer to 4 to 5% for this calendar year. The gross domestic product, last published in December of 2015 for the year 2014 and prior. There's been significant revisions to the initial GDP estimates back to 2005, I believe. And we expect to get the 2015 GDP number later this year. So a lot of it has to do with the actual spending made at the federal and local level. So just to point out, the total government expenditures reflected in the GDP is about $1.3 billion, inclusive of all autonomous and semi-autonomous and executive agencies. And at the federal level, it's closer to $2 billion. And again, with respect to spending, given the dip, we do have an increase in the total spending in 2015 over 2014 at the federal level. GDP will most likely, if not remain the same, but actually increase. And going into 2016, again, it's going to be reflective of total spending by all accounts as measured in the GDP. My concern at this point, if you were to ask me what my concern would be, was to reconcile the numbers presented here as published in meeting the 2016 actual general fund budget amount of $665,042,150, and so I haven't seen the information nor tracked the monthly revenue figures, but I know there was some concern late last year about GRT, in particular, being, dropping, and so I don't know if the fiscal team has actually resolved what the decrease in GRT was last year. But our economy has changed, and our sources of consumption, are pretty much international now. So, with respect to online purchases, which I can just get, relate to this Amazon effect or buying online, you could possibly have a decrease in local spending from local retailers because of that. And this is something which is trending nationwide. So there's got to be some way to tax these imports to recoup a lot of the taxes that we're losing at the retail level locally. And it's actually going to probably get worse for local retailers in the years to come. The other concern which was raised with respect to employment, just on the last 2 quarters of last year, this year's information is not published from where I've checked. But yeah, the denial rate for alien laborers is, has been 66% for the since mid-year last year through December, and of course now we've actually, as reported by Gary, that it's virtually zero. So all the applicants for alien laborers has actually been nil. The approvals have been nil, and that really should be a concern to everybody. My own personal experience with this is finding a contractor to repair my roof, and I called several, and they all told me they don't have alien laborers to do the jobs, and so I was very surprised that it was a common response by contractors that from those sources I've sought out, and so I believe the problem's actually bigger, but I don't have numbers to really to define that. Now, as far as the other work that I do with respect to trade, our trade data has been scant lately, and there's really, it's really been a challenge to, generate reports, and so keeping track of net exports in particular, imports and exports will be a challenge going forward, which is significant for the gross domestic product measure. Because at face value, when you look at the GDP report, imports are 3 times as much as exports across merchandise and services, and so the effort that we have to do locally to increase the economy, to grow the economy, we basically have to do a fourfold increase in spending just to net out the leakages from imports, and that's something we always have to deal with, but we really need to look at that a little bit more carefully. What exactly is the total net multiplier effect, as it's called, given the significance of imports, how it plays in our economy. I'm glad to know that tourism is picking up, that we have a stable labor force, and possibly, we'll have added employment levels there. And, so prospectively, I believe the economy will grow. I've always maintained it's no better than moderate growth, and that's not so much a reflection on tax revenues, but more so with just the GDP measure itself. So, so that's really all I have to say at this point. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm sure they're really interested. There was a lot of buzz when you mentioned the online. Do you have any idea of how much is lost in that?
I don't know what the number was, but it was dramatic enough to for them to ask me about it. And but I wasn't involved in discussions with other those that were tasked to look at that. But the other information that corroborated data we have is the postal system does keep track of the volume of parcels that go through, and but that data is very dated, so we don't have anything current. But I'm sure the post office has picked up business as well as other air and sea shippers for parcels. So, but the latest, I just read in MSN the other day that Amazon has actually grown in market share above Exxon, and that's kind of it's very alarming, for people to just buy direct and bypass the local retailer. And that's something that retailers have to really have to come to grips with, whether they're going to stay in business or not, because of that. But restaurants are, solid business. Hotels are solid business. Those that have tangible, real-time benefits, those will continue to thrive.
Anita, have you noticed that in the use tax? I thought we gave you guys additional authority on that.
Yes, the use tax we just started picking up. Unfortunately, we haven't had a report on what the what we're bringing in. I believe DOA would have that report. And internet sales is something that we have discussed in the past. I believe we're still looking at that. Businesses are losing income here because most people now, a lot of people like to shop online for convenience, and there's no tax on that. So right now, I believe the Fair Market, I forgot what it was called, Fair Market Act, but you must have a nexus on in the state or, in this case, island, and that would only apply to very few, like Macy's or perhaps Kmart, Home Depot. That's the area that we can target, but we're still doing some research on that.
Joe, did you want to, on the online, have you done any analysis of that?
No, Senator, I have not.
Okay.
There is some information collected and published in the economic census.
Okay. Mr. Parrish, you mentioned the construction, and I'm just wondering, the building permits, as of March 28, 2016, there were only 616 permits, which was down from last year, I think. Does anybody have any information on what that might?
I don't. I just checked for online sources, and I haven't seen that.
We have it in a table through March 2016.
And as compared to last year, was it up or down?
The first 6 months of the fiscal year are running above 2015.
Oh, that's
but
good.
Since it's only 6 months of the fiscal year, the total so far year to date is 166 million versus 226 for fiscal year 15.
Yeah, Mr. Vice Speaker, in my notation, my own estimate is just based on the moving average, we're trending at 296 million for fiscal year 2016.
And in your report, Mr. Parrish, you have grants. What grants are you referring to on that?
Oh, these are just all source grants at the federal level. I don't have the detail, nor am I prepared to discuss them. This is just what's reported on USA spending.gov.
And that's for the entire year. That's Is that the amount that's actually applied for and and approved for Guam?
That's right.
Because that's a
through-
substantial drop.
Yeah, through August 3rd of this year. Yes, that's right. But again, it's a moving target. Probably another month, as those things are fed into the system, those numbers will change. When I did this, just from early July, there's been revisions back to 2013. So for some reason, there's always edits and updates to this.
Oh, okay, because now I remember. I was just talking to people that applied for grants, and their grant applications were due in July. So they won't know about their approval until before September, so that we could get that number back up again if everybody applied for all the grants that they were supposed to apply for or reapply, and because it's been going pretty good, and then that dropped. So I was trying to, but that might just be the number approved to date, and I know that the grant cycle was July, because everybody was, I couldn't find last month, they were all writing grants. So I'm hoping that that'll get back up. Did any of you have any further questions? No? Well, it's been very positive. I see Mr. No? Yes. So on that note,
Can I say a few words?
you can. I'm just saying you're probably better off with the note that he left us with than with anything else. I didn't expect that one, but if you're going to read a statement.
You'd like to read a statement, sir? Good
No,
morning.
I'm just wondering.
Yeah, it's just a couple pages, if it's okay with you.
Well, you just submitted. I'm still reveling in what he said, so I'm happy that it's up and everybody's up. I really don't want to get into anything else this
No,
morning.
we're not gonna
It was just
I just wanted to share a few of my thoughts on the economic outlook also. So it's pertinent to what we're talking about.
Go ahead.
Thank you, sir. Buenas and Hafide, Vice Speaker, and members of the committee, Senator Ada, two Senator Adas, Tom Ada, Tony Ada, Senator Morrison. Buenas. And thank you for having me here today. It has been 6 months since the executive budget request for FY 2017 was submitted to the legislature. The revenue estimate for FY 2017 consists of $899.4 million in general fund revenue. Of this amount, $736.4 is available for appropriation, which is net of 2% GF reserve for deficit reduction, $198.2 million for special revenue funds, and $47.2 million for federal matching grants. We believe these projected revenue numbers still remain valid today, as when they were submitted in January 2016 to the legislature. We continue to review our revenue estimates in collaboration with our fiscal partners. The basis for our conclusion assumes that certain economic outcomes would take place in FY 2017, and these are approximately $961.6 million in potential new economic activities, consisting of $664.8 million in local projects and $296.8 million in federal projects. The net tax effect from these projects are integrated into our FY 2017 revenue projection. When we looked at the sectors of the economy, we have included in our revenue projections for 2017 tourism. Our percentage growth in tourism was at 2.7 million, but I heard from the panel today that it might be significantly more than that. So our projected outlay in 2017 amounts to $24.7 million. We have plant expansion that we've tracked in our analyses. Kencor, mentioned earlier. The Città de Mare Hotel, mentioned earlier also. So these comes in the total plant expansion of these hotels. And in fact, I think there's a new one here. The projected outlay for FY 2017 is $182.2 million from these two capital improvements. And then we also took a look at capital improvement projects from line agencies. And we looked at DPW as contributing about $12.1 million in our projected outlay for 2017. DOC projects is at $1.3 million. GFD is at $1.8 million. DYA, $297,000. GPD at $1.2 million. And DPW design at $86 million. Grand total CIPs that we're looking at is at $102,811,000. We moved to the semi-autonomous and autonomous agencies, and we included in our analyses GMH at $2.2 million, DOE at $100 million, Port Authority of Guam $6.1 million, GIAA $80 million, GPA $14.6 million, GWA $111.2 million, and GITA $15.7. So that is roughly a grand total of $330.1 million from the semi-autonomous and autonomous agencies. Then we move to the private non-government construction projects. We have the NRG Solar in Dandan at $15 million, and the Retail Center Northern Guam at $10 million. We also have in our analyses military activities, military construction. It was brought up earlier. But for the Navy, we have in our projected outlay for construction projects $21.5 million, repairs at $10.5 million, prefab buildings at $200,000, fiber optics at $58.9 million, A&E design at $7.1 million, technical support at $14.9 million, facilities ops support at $8.6 million. So from the Navy, the branch of the Navy, we're looking at projected outlay of $122 million. Moving over to the Air Force, we have construction that we projected at $126.8 million, repairs $34.5, prefab buildings at $810,000, miscellaneous at $4.8 million, E&E design at $2.4 million, technical support at $4.8 million, and facilities ops support at $150 million. The aggregate for Air Force, we have it at $174.4 million worth of projects. In the Army and others, we have it at $304,000 for an aggregate of $296.1 and a grand total for the capital improvement project of $664.8, along with the $296.8, amounts to almost $1 billion worth of projects that we are monitoring, tracking. From this almost $1 billion worth of projects, we are looking at receiving revenue of a small percentage, and we are incorporating that into our own analyses. The increased economic expectations are based on the following. Tourism will continue to grow based on high hotel occupancy and more airline flights to accommodate the travel demands to Guam. Building permits as of March 2016 have exceeded the building permits issued in March 2015. So BBMR expect such increases to continue in FY 2017 with private and local government construction activities of up to the $664.8 million that I mentioned earlier. Federal contract dollars of up to $300 million have been awarded in 2016. that have yet to be implemented but carried out in 2017. These contracts would include both service-related and construction-type projects. The Guam real estate market has improved, which would contribute to more economic activities, such as, based on the March-May real estate market update, Cornerstone Valuation Guam, Inc., in April 2016, Guam real estate sales volume experienced a spike due to the 125 million sales of the Westin Resort Guam. With this sale, Guam may see 500 million total sales by the end of 2016. The source is Casa Guam magazine, June 2016. There are approximately 1,200 alien laborers on Guam that would provide a portion of the labor force needed for new constructions in FY 2017. Any additional labor needed to continue the added constructions would come from the U.S. labor market, brought in by U.S. companies that have been awarded federal construction contracts. In addition to the economic activities, the administration's projection also includes historical data requiring lots of manpower, analyses, countless hours to arrive at our projection. It is our contention that the economic condition for Guam is highly positive, given the economic indicators that have been provided. It is for this reason that we continue our revenue confirmation that the FY 2017 revenue numbers presented in January are still good today. But it does not end here with projecting or forecasting revenues. It also involves the taxpayers of Guam. They too must do their part and pay their fair share of taxes due to the government. The amount of taxes owed by taxpayers need to be collected. Taxpayers have a responsibility to pay their assessment. If everyone was to pay what is owed to the government, we probably won't be in this financial situation that we are in right now. However, the reality is that in spite of being owed, the government still has to go out and find these non-compliant taxpayers in order to collect the funds that rightfully belong to this government. Just Masi.
Thank you very much. And, well, that was very positive, Mr. Bradley and everybody else. I guess you have your marching orders from your colleague to your right.
Go get him, Ruby. Go get him, please.
And extend to the administration our congratulations for floating the bond this morning at 3.3. And I would have adjourned the budget hearings. I may just leave it open just to try to figure out what the new numbers are for the debt service. I'm hoping that as well as you guys did with that somehow we'll be able to find more money. Let me tell you, it would make my life so much easier if I could just say yes. But I have to try to make sure that we go out and get everybody's information. And I thank all of you for coming this morning. And with everybody's presentation, it'll be a lot easier for my colleagues who did not attend this morning to be able to read in small details. In small segments of several paragraphs apiece of what the drivers are. So with that, I'll recess until I call a hearing just to get what the debt service ratio is, and if we can get that in writing, we may just announce an adjournment of the budget hearings. But thank you, everybody, and we'll stand in recess, subject to the chair's announcement. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.